Good morning and welcome to Sunday Story Hour, where we share real-life stories of how human design has helped people tell a richer, more true story of who they really are. Today's guest is Robin Winn, who is a best-selling author of multiple books, and she is also a 6'2" emotional generator. So I'm very excited to hear Robin's story, and I know you guys will be too. So, Robin, if you want to start, I will do a couple technical things I need to do while you tell us a little bit about how you, if you're okay with that. I guess I should ask you a sacral question, right? Would you like to share your story right away?
Sure, I'm happy to. Thank you, Kathy, so much. I'm thrilled to be here with you all. Yeah. So as Kathy said, I'm a 6'2" emotional generator. I was first introduced to human design in 2006. A colleague of mine introduced us. I was in a teacher training for the diamond logos. And a colleague of mine introduced us. It actually took me a year before I went to have a session with her. And honestly, it was fairly overwhelming. There was so much information, and yet there were three pieces of information that made a huge difference and shifted right there the trajectory of my life. So I really appreciate that it doesn't take a lot of human design information to have a big impact. So the fact that I was a generator and had to follow my yes, nos, that was big. I mean, the simplest things are really sometimes the most impactful. And the second thing was that my wife was a projector, and that dramatically shifted how we saw each other, understanding that dynamic. I write about this in my books, but we had done, I was a therapist. We had both been in therapy, done a lot of therapy, a lot of couples therapy. We had really great communication skills. But that piece of her thinking I was a workaholic and me thinking she was a little bit lazy, was a place we butted up against on pretty much a daily basis, because I wake up in the morning, my motor's running, I'm ready to go. She wakes up in the morning, she's like a cat, she wants to hang out. She's, very slow entry into the world, and was just really dramatically different styles that we didn't understand. And because we didn't understand, we judged each other.
I'm laughing because my husband's a manifesting generator and I'm a projector, and that I'm the cat.
Yeah. So that really, that was the beginning of appreciating difference in a new light. I mean, I was seeped, in the Enneagram. I loved systems. I was interested in astrology. I was interested in all of that, but this somehow shifted everything, took it out of a judgmental place, took it out of a hierarchical place, and kind of leveled the playing field and activated curiosity. So those two things. And the third thing was that my authority was emotional, and that I wasn't designed to make decisions in the moment. And I had a habit of making decisions in the moment. And I had a habit of being very vulnerable to sales. And, I just, with that open head, I'd get so excited. Someone would bring something into the field. I would be so excited, like, yes, let's do it. And then, wow, then afterward, I'd be like, why did I do that? And I didn't trust my decision-making from that place of not understanding. So it was a relational understanding, and an understanding of myself that really, it was a big impact. It was like a rubber hits the road kind of impact. At that time, there weren't all the places you could go and run a free chart. And, that wasn't happening quite yet. It was a very elaborate system. So I didn't have access.
What year was this around again?
That was 2004.
Okay. That's what I thought.
Yeah. So I didn't have access to bring it into my life. Honestly, it felt pretty far out there. It felt I was a woo person, but it felt woo, 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 woo. And I didn't feel like I had access to use it, or it didn't seem very readily available to me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that there's been a huge shift even just since I found it, or it found me 7 years ago. And so you're talking almost 20 years ago. That's a huge difference on just what was available in general, right? But
Yeah.
you were, speaking of a woo person, I would love for you to share a little bit of your woo history that you'd had, because I think your journey is just fascinating. So just if you wouldn't mind briefly telling people some of the woo things you have done before human design.
Oh, let's see. Let's see where I would start with that. I have to go digging in the treasure trove to
You always been a woo person?
pull that up. Well,
Like even as like a teenager, or?
I have the sun is in gate 3.
Mhm.
So that's innovation. So
Right.
yes, I have always been outside the box. Call that woo or not woo. Yes, I've always been outside the box. I was always grappling with the question of God. And, as a kid, I was sure I was going to go to hell because I was a terrible person. And then when I was in 6th grade, I started studying the Greek gods and goddesses. And I thought, wow, this is made up. This whole thing is made up. And I just became an atheist. And that shifted. That was a big shift for me. And then when I was in my early 20s, I got involved with, when I was 19, I think I read Autobiography of a Yogi. And as I was reading it, my breath stopped. I was practicing some of the breathing stuff he was talking about, and my breath just stopped and was like, okay, here we go. I was someone who was tapped in to the universe in a certain way. I had, I don't know if people would call them out of body experiences. I did have kind of with my openness, one way I would describe it, with my openness, I had a permeability and a sensitivity that was in a dance with the universe at some level that I didn't have articulation for. And then, let's see, my late teens, early 20s, I got involved with a group of women who were goddesses and doing, I don't know if you've ever heard of Vicki Noble. She created the first round tarot deck, feminist tarot deck.
No.
So yeah, so this was a long time ago. And this was in the late 80s, the early 80s. We were picking tarot cards and we were doing rituals and we were following the moon. And so, yeah, I was doing a lot of Wicca stuff in my early days. I got involved. It's just been an unwinding story of spiritual teachers and teachings. And I'm thinking you're wanting something in specific, and I'm not sure I'm giving it to you about the story.
I guess, I'm fascinated with the work of Byron Katie, and I know you've mentioned you have some history with Ram Dass. And so all of that stuff to me was very wow, this person has definitely spent time finding herself before you. And then you did this diamond logo work, which I had never heard of. So I'm sure people listening don't know. So I guess what I'm looking for is you really did a lot of things that would help you know who you were.
Well, here's the thing. I was driven by pain. I was, and I write about this in my books. Once I discovered human design, I've got an open G. My son is in gate 3, difficulty at the beginning. I'm a 6-2 profile. Those first 30 years were a nightmare for me.
Yes.
So, just deep suffering and feeling like I did not belong on this planet. And who was I and why was I here? And, being wise beyond my years, as like the 6, I was like, I saw things people didn't see. I understood what was happening, and I didn't understand why I was here, what I was here to do. I really thought I didn't belong on the planet. So there was a drive, and the different ways I tried to feed that or, make sense of myself in the world. First of all, early on, it was literature. I read like crazy. So I got a degree in English literature. at UC Berkeley. I was trying to understand the world and people. And then I did a lot of therapy just because it was like I had to figure this out. I had to figure something out. I became a body worker. I did something called Rosen Method body work that really looks at what's true in your story and what's like, we looked at the breath, and when the breath came through, it was like you were speaking truth. And when you weren't, you would stay contracted. So I did a lot of body therapy work to kind of get to know myself and understand myself. And then I was, again, young. I met Amachi when the first time do you know who Amachi is? She's the hugging saint.
Oh, I think I've heard of her. Yes.
Yeah. So the first time she came to the US, I was in a living room with her. I always happened to get it with these teachers before they become big, so I was in a living room with her. She was amazing. She's an amazing being. So after Alma, I met Byron Katie. I heard about her while I was at an Indian dinner at Amachi's ashram. Someone said, I've got Amachi and I've got Katie. I said, who is this Katie person? Because I go by frequency. I just resonate with frequency. Like, well, who is that person? Every cell in my body said I needed to know this woman. So she was, again, very small. Not many people knew about her. And I started, my wife and I started going to her center in Barstow, California. We were living in Berkeley. We'd drive down there almost every weekend and do workshops with her. And I started organizing for her. And then I did her first school. And then I became her right-hand person for her schools, traveled to Europe with her, just immersed in working with her. And that was another big shift of like, oh my gosh, how I've been seeing my lens. I mean, so much about this, we started before we got on talking about the assemblage point. So much of my world had been seen through judging people and judging the world. Mm. And, she used that judgment as a way to pierce through and find a different way of seeing and understanding the world, coming to peace with the world. So that was a big part of my shifting out of suffering. Really, that was a big scrub from feeling like I don't belong here to, of course I belong here. I exist. I belong here. Hello. That was a story. Yeah. That was a story. Yeah. So I worked with Katie for a number of years. And then I again was introduced to Faisal Mukaddam, who was he's the Diamond Logos.
Oh, okay.
He and Hamid came over from Kuwait in the 80s and had an awakening, a psycho-spiritual awakening, and understood that used the Enneagram and inquiry we talked about this earlier again, the shifting of the assemblage point from our egos and our patterning, like if you use the Enneagram, our egoic patterning to our essential self, to our being.
So I'm going to stop you because you and I have an interesting conversation that we had just started before we got on about the assemblage point. And I had never heard of it until a couple of years ago when my sister, Barbara, who does a lot of energy work and lives in Thailand, introduced it to me. And it's one of the things that she checks on people when she's doing a session. The first thing she muscle tests and asks, can I know where their assemblage point is seated? She has a chart that says, I think it's supposed to be like JK8, and I'm sure she'll correct me because it's probably not that, but something like that. Let's say it's JK8 on this grid for a woman. And if it's there, then you're good. And if it's like, there have been times like when my sister, who actually my other sister passed a year ago today, my sister could connect with her energy and she could sense her assemblage point dropping. And so, but I've never heard anybody in human design talk about the assemblage point before until I read your most recent book and you were talking about it. And so if you could just explain it a little bit as you understand it to people listening and where you were introduced to that whole concept. Was it with Diamond
so
Logos?
it was in the Diamond Logos work with Faisal. And, I think words are tricky and I think different people may have different attributes to words. So I'm not sure that what your sister is doing is the same thing that I'm talking about. But it might be. I don't know. So the assemblage point, I mean, Carlos Castaneda talked
Yes.
about the assemblage point. The way that it was introduced to me and that I'm working with it, I work with it, is that we are organized. Most of us are organized. And this, I could say, goes all the way back to the body work, or organized around concepts where if you think about it in human design terms, we go to our head and look at the world through our heads. We make decisions through our heads, or we are conditioned in our centers, in our channels, in our gates. We're conditioned and live out of conditioning. So we could say, when you clear your conditioning, you're shifting your assemblage point. As you clear your conditioning, you shift your assemblage point. The way I see it and understand it is we're shifting from identifying with egoic patterns to identifying with our essential self, our true nature, who we are, our beingness. That is the shift out of the egoic identification to the being identification.
Okay. So that's how we can do it ourselves, right? Yeah.
We do it as we unload, as we take the backpacks off, as we untie the knots. You know, I had one spiritual teacher I worked with, Leslie Temple Thurston, and she talked about the knot of Vishnu that was in the solar plexus. Like that's the for her, that was the linchpin. For you undo that knot, and then the energy can come up through the other chakras. But you know, however we do it, that is the shift. As long as we're living from an ego-based identity, we are suffering.
Right.
We are not in alignment with who we truly are. We are living. The experience I had up, you know, for those first 30 years, especially, and then started shifting in later 30s when I met Katie, was there's suffering. There's a war against the self. The ego is fear-based. It's essentially fear-based. It's driven by fear. Our beings are not engaged in fear.
Yes.
That's not, there's no reality for fear in our true nature.
Yeah. Well, you know, for people who aren't familiar with Byron Katie's and the work, it's really a life-changing thing. And I felt like even just going through it one time, like I went through it one time with a particular person who always pushed my buttons, right? And it's when you do that last thing where you take away the fear of it happening again and you welcome it, right? And I loved the fact that she tells you, so Byron Katie has this, for those who don't know, she has these questions you ask yourself and about a situation that it has control over you, right? It has power over your emotion, your ego's fighting against it. And you ask these different questions. And when you start doing it, there's a natural thing to go, oh, I get it, and not finish, right? To be like, oh, I get it. Now I get the point. You're going to, you know, whatever. And I love that she makes you like, she's like, no, you finish it. You got to do all 5. And it really was one of those things. And I have only done it twice on 2 different things. And now I feel like I can go straight to that whole like, oh, all right, bring it on.
Exactly.
You know, right? This is something I'm here to learn. This is making me uncomfortable. Oh, I'm growing. I'm learning, right? And that's what human design has really given me the map to see where I'm growing and where I'm learning and where I'm taking in stuff that's not really me and pushing back against it in fear or lack of worth. I think so much of it just comes down to not having enough self-love, right? And belief in our enoughness.
Yeah, it's curious to me because I just took a peek at your chart, you know. It's curious to me that you talk about self-love and in value with your defined will center and defined G center, how that yeah, just the difference, because both of those are open for me and they seem like, well, obvious places where there would be deficiency. So I guess I'm just curious for you.
Well, I think what happens when you're defined in a place like, I have a defined G, but it's defined only through the 1-8. I have no other connection to my other. I have 6 defined centers, but only those 2 connect. So I have this feeling of my voice feels like I'm a self-projected projector in a lot of ways, right? So when people will not respond to something when I'm speaking from my heart, it's very easy to shut down. And I have told people, a lot of people know I have this sleep apnea thing where I was told that I have an obstructed airway. And when I saw that little picture they scanned and it had this, she's like, it's like a straw. And I immediately was like, that's my 1-8. That's my constricted voice. That's my shutting myself down because of the criticism of others. And when you have a defined will, and mine's super defined, I have, the one channel, but I have all the gates defined. I don't have any open gates. And then that's also another split. My will to the spleen is, I'm a triple split. So only those 2 connect. And there's a lot of pushback from people because 70% of the planet has an open will. So they see my definedness, right, as something that feels bossy, pushy, and there's more pushback, right? So as a projector with all the projector wounds, and then you add those 2 things on top of it, it really can make me feel like I'm constantly having to pull back because I'm too much. Does that make sense? So
it makes perfect sense.
To love myself still and be too much has taken me almost 60 years to do. I'll be 60 in November. And I think it's only been a year where I can really just say, I know who I am, who I came here to be, and I'm not for everyone. And that's okay.
Mm.
So, yeah.
That's beautiful.
So I want to go back to your story. So
Okay.
You were saying how you were, how this really impacted your marriage. How long had you been with your wife when you?
We'd been together since 81, and that was so. Wow. We'd been together 15 years,
and it still made that
13 years. Yeah. Oh, yeah, huge. Yeah. And it's an ongoing. Actually, these are practices. I see the chart as a engagement, not as, a flat seat kind of thing. It's a living dynamic. So right. I am constantly still learning about how to be with a projector, and for her, how to really hone and be. I mean, we ask each other the open-ended and yes, no questions, but it's an ongoing deepening understanding. And I just got something about her from you talking about your chart, because she's a triple split projector with the 1-8 and the 3955. I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I get. That I get what you're talking about. So,
and then do you bridge her splits?
I bridged two of her splits. Okay. So that was also a big aha. Like, oh, because she would get up every morning and go out for coffee. And I couldn't understand a coffee and a muffin. I thought she was wasting money going out. You can have that here, but she needed to do it, and it was just like, once I got the triple split, like, oh, of course, go. It's not personal. Yeah. You need this.
Yes.
Go.
Yeah, that's huge. And now I also want to switch gears a little bit, because you and I are both 6 lines. We're both 6-2s, and we're both off the roof, and we have been for a little bit now. And, there's this big thing where the 6th line is always looking for their soulmate, but it's said that they often don't find them until after 50. And I've been with my husband. I was married really young to someone else when I was 19 for that's part of my whole 3rd line phase, right? And then, sowed my wild oats after that. My husband and I got married when I was 32, I think, something like that. And then so we were on the roof this whole time, and I love my husband. We've never we've had our ups and downs. I think anybody who says they hasn't had a real, they're avoiding things, in my opinion. I shouldn't, I don't know that for certain, but for me, this whole work that I've been doing now, because I didn't find human design till I was already off the roof. And so then this process of really finding who I am. And there was a point just maybe a year or two ago where I had to say a lot of things that I had to preface with, I love you, but I love me more. So, this is what I need to do. And I'm sorry if you don't understand that, and that has been a big shift in our marriage because it's caused him to be completely different with me. And I believe we're much more genuine and authentic. So although I don't have a different person who's my soulmate, I think the soulmate process really didn't hit where it needed. Like, you couldn't really be authentic in a relationship until you're really authentic with yourself, right? And since we're not really in that role model phase till we come off the roof, I think for me, that's what's happened. And I'm curious if you can speak to how that's felt for you as a sixth line.
Well, again, I feel like it's an ongoing process. I mean, Yarrow and I got together when I was 23, and we definitely, most people change relationships. We just like reincarnated over and over again. We shift the relationship with the growth, because there's so much growth, right? There's so much growth, and relationships are such a great, instigation of growth. But yeah, I think what you're pointing to is really potent and powerful. And it's like a shoe that suddenly feels too small. If you're not being authentic with yourself, you have to work with that. And so I definitely have experienced that in my relationship with Yarrow, a deepening authenticity with myself. Even knowing human design, it doesn't matter. Knowing human design is one thing. Living it is a whole nother thing. Actually living it, being engaged with it. And yeah, I love what you're saying. I think that's exactly, I still feel like it's more, there's more and more authenticity. It's, again, part of that assemblage point for me, shifting from what are the egoic patterns I'm running that I don't even realize I'm running.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing them and then being honest about them.
What's Yarrow's profile?
She's a 6'2".
He is a 6'2" also. Okay. My husband's a 5'1". So the poor man, I projected all my problems in my life have been his fault. And he'll tell you, right? And he's still dealing. And I've had to, incorporate when I'm responding to his responses, remembering how much I projected on him. So he still has this conditioned response to feel like everything is his fault. Plus he's a small split. So, and for people listening who don't know, a lot of times when someone has a small split, they view that as something that's wrong with them. And I bridge his small split with my 57 and my 9. I will connect him in 2 different places. So whereas him bridging my splits makes me feel smothered and controlled, me bridging his splits makes him feel complete. So it's very interesting to understand the dynamics and the responses. And it's been interesting to wait and not respond out of reactions. Like just yesterday, he was telling me how he thinks we need to both make, he's speaking for both of us, which automatically I'm like this, right? I think we both need to make a point of getting out of the house and going for a walk or and it felt so controlling, right? And I was able to think to myself, he wants me with him and I'm feeling controlled. And isn't it interesting that I still feel this way? And I love, and I think that's, one of the other things I wanted to talk about that you called the witnessing observer. Mm-hmm. That's been a very helpful concept for me to, when I feel something, to witness it, observe it, and be able to see the energy mechanics of it and take away this personal emotional story of, he's controlling me or rejecting, whatever that story is that the mind makes up to explain the response in the body, right? And maybe can you speak a little bit to that witnessing observer idea?
Yeah, well, it goes back to that assemblage point thing. We make conclusions in our childhood. We have traumas. They happen. None of us escape that, right? Something happens. It's not a fit. That's not a match. That doesn't align with us. We draw a conclusion. Something's wrong with us, usually. Something's wrong with them. But ultimately, there's a feeling of deficiency. We create a whole world, we believe something, and then we create a whole world. We look for that. We create patterns that create that. Those play out automatically like a tape until we bring in our awareness. When we shine the light of awareness on it, bring online our witnessing observer, then we can see, just like you did with your husband, oh, this is what's happening. We don't take it personally. We don't believe it. We don't engage with it as truth. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, he's trying to control me. That's it. You feel it. He's trying to control me. It's truth. It's absolute truth. Right? And then you live out of that. You push away. Whole worlds are created out of that belief. He's trying to control me.
Right.
You turn on that light of the witnessing observer. Oh, he wants to be with me. He bridges my splits. I feel trapped by that. He feels soothed by that. Okay. So what do we do now? What's the next step? But the light, when you see the light, you can't believe it. It's like, I love that story of the snake and the rope. Once you see it's a rope, you can't make it a snake. You can't blame him anymore. It's not possible.
Right. Yeah. Right.
It's just not possible. So that witnessing observer is the medicine, really, to shift the seeing and the understanding and to bring light.
And I don't remember if this was the way you phrased it but the way I've always learned to do that is when I feel something, is I will start with, isn't that interesting? Because interesting is so, it's kind of a neutral observation. Like it requires some notice. And so then, especially I have the 3955, which your wife has, and so I'm sure you're familiar with the melancholy and I will just be I'll just wake up and I'm like, don't talk to me. And I a lot of times blame it on my coffee. I haven't had coffee. And other times I cannot have coffee.
She does the exact same thing. Right? I got to have my coffee.
Don't talk to me. Why are you talking to me? Do you not see that I'm pouring coffee now? I haven't made coffee, put coffee in me. And I put it on that. But it is really just more about my wave and where I'm at that moment. Right. And yeah, there's a certain amount I got to wake up for 2 minutes, but I really, my second line wants to be alone. I don't want to be whatever. And I'll catch myself, now when I'm in this thing, where I'm in my wave and it's not just for that second, or if I find myself just being really snippy, and then I'll be like, isn't that interesting? Last night we were walking and I noticed myself, we were walking through the neighborhood and I noticed myself saying, I don't know why they painted their door that color. I don't really like the way it looks. And then I would be like, they need to prune up the bottom of that tree. And then all of a sudden I stopped and I went to myself. I was like, isn't that interesting that I'm super critical right now? And then I was talking to my sister about something and I found myself saying some things in a little bit more, they were kind of observations, but they were very judgy. And I was like, isn't that interesting? I wonder what this is supposed to be bringing to my, and so instead of beating myself up, because there's a part of me that really doesn't want to be judgy. Right. No. I was like, I went and looked at the transit. So I'm like, what's going on? I couldn't figure it out, but it was still interesting to me. So that witnessing observer really helps me to be more gentle with myself. So I thank you for that idea. It's helped me a lot. So the other idea. Go ahead.
Let me just respond to that. So again, I just look at your chart while you're talking and I think, so I wouldn't go to, isn't that interesting? I love that. But you're in the field of curiosity with that, right? You open the door of curiosity from judgment to curiosity. That's the shift we're looking at.
Right.
But for you in particular, I think, and I try this on and see how it sits with you. I see, oh, you have Pluto in 64, conscious and unconscious. So that's like the transformation key for you. So interesting. I think 64 is really interested. It's looking at, right? It's like, what's interesting here? Let's sort through this whole thing and see let's make sense of the whole caboodle. So it fits for me that 64 would be a key to activate for you to shift out of judgment into transformation.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. So for other people, they might be a different question that the witnessing observer asks more readily.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Okay. That's a really cool perspective. So what does your witnessing observer do?
I haven't looked at it in those terms before. It just came up with you right now. I get just super curious. So we'll play with this for a second. So my Pluto is in 29 and 59.
Okay.
So I do, I am like a dog with a bone. I do just stick with things. Well, let me stick with this. Let me stick with this. Let me stick with this. Let's stick with this and see what we get. I don't give up easily. So I think my witnessing observer stays in, like stick with it, and penetrate, stick with it. Something like that.
How do you interpret the 59 too in that? Because that's my design sun. And the thing that stood out the most whenever anybody just was talking about the 59 too was they referred to it as self-imposed barriers to intimacy.
Interesting. I think of the 59 for myself, again, in Pluto in the 59 is that I think of the 59 like sperm.
Okay.
It's wanting to penetrate. It's wanting to break through, whether it has a 6 or not, it's wanting to break through to something. And for me, the 2 part of that is like in my own world, doing it in my own world. Like I'm an artist. I don't do enough art or writing. Like when I transformation happens when I sit down, persevere, and penetrate. Like let things come through. Let that energy, that sacral energy, have some life, like an emotional life, because it's going towards the emotional solar plexus, right? So there's an emotional, like, okay, we can do this. Let's figure this out. Let's stick in there. There's a real stick to itness that I think, and again, I've got the sun in gate 3. So the more I stay with something, the more it illuminates.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, there were a couple things I wanted to go to from there. But I keep in my mind hearing the word that I can't say. Entelechy, is that how you say it?
Entelechy, yeah.
Okay. It's something you use this expression in a lot of your books.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a great concept. And can you just speak to it a little bit and how you see it in human design?
Yeah. So entelechy is basically your innate potential. So an oak tree, like an oak
Acorn.
There you go. An acorn.
I knew it was in there somewhere.
An acorn has entelechy to become an oak tree. It's not going to become something else. Will it live to its full potential? Will it have the right circumstances and environment to do that? I don't know, but it has that potential. Our body graph holds a certain, we're like our each unique acorn or lotus seed or whatever that would be. We hold a certain potential. Our conditioning can work to support us to realize that potential if we bring that light of awareness in, right? It can be grist for the mill. It can be, in Tibetan Buddhism, they call it fuel for the path. So not to go black and white, oh, this is bad, this is good. But what is our potential? And are we living it? What is our dharma? Are we living it? And the body graph holds our potential, is the seed of our potential. Are we aligning with it, or are we staying stuck in conditioned ways that are limiting us and keeping us from, Oprah talks about, your best lived life or something like that. But truly,
Mm-hmm.
When we're living who we're here to be, just like you with your husband, the whole world changes when we start to align. Everything matches the frequency. It's a frequency world. We're in a frequency universe. We align with ourselves and the universe comes to meet that. This is also Byron Katie's work, the external comes to meet the internal. Right. So if we are out of alignment, if we're not living our entelechy, the world is going to reflect that back to us.
Yeah. And so many people I see now and using human design against themselves, right? Where, I'm a projector. I can't do anything. I have to just sit here. I can't talk to somebody until they talk to me. I can't, or I have an open emotional solar plexus. So I'm not, those aren't my feelings. I'm not, and those people with emotions are they're pushing them away like there's some sort of, problem. So how do you see like this future of human design, like now that there's so many people talking about it?
Yeah, I love this question, actually. And I write about it in this last book on human design and essential oils, that, human design, the way I see human design is that it's what I call a terma. In Tibetan Buddhism, there are these teachings that are hidden in different, in the waters, in the rocks. They're hidden in people's minds, and at the right time, they're revealed to humanity. Mm-hmm. So I feel like this was a terma that was revealed to humanity at this time for us, for this time. With human design came a huge wave of like, oh my gosh, I'm okay. I'm good. I don't have to make myself wrong. And then the backlash, or then the making it, like mainstream almost, like, people started using it against themselves. Like you're saying, I'm a projector, and oh no, not understanding and really the multidimensional capacity and aspect of the chart. It's a living transmission. It's not a flatsy thing. It's not logical information, but we've kind of, the challenge is to not have it just go to a party game. Oh yeah, I'm this, you're this. That's fun. That's great. We can have it be fun. But you think about the tarot, or you think about, cards, and if you go back, it's very esoteric. This is esoteric stuff, you guys. This is really deep stuff. This is deep.
It's kind of like when people think they're not into astrology because they're into astrology because they read the Sunday horoscope that's like this long for their sun sign, right?
Exactly.
You can't do it on a surface level and have it have any kind of impact. And so many people are afraid, or they're not ready, so they're not ready to go deep yet because they're still in the fear. They haven't done what it takes to. And so what do you tell those people?
Well, let me back up a little bit. I think it's inevitable. What's happening with human design is inevitable. It's the backlash to it, or it's the next evolution of it. So I think it's like wildfire, and it's going to become it's going to be part of the conversation. And it was on the Washington Post, what's in for 2023, right? What's in human design. So that's fantastic, right? Oh, the seeds are being planted. I think for myself, I can't go to a place of judgment for that, even though it's not. I know what human design, and I know what it can do and what it is. And it's always unfolding for me. It's a living, unfolding thing. I also know when I had my session, learning my wife was a projector, I'm a generator, and I'm emotional, changed everything. So those little things can be life-changing. Getting it at that level also can have that effect. The concern is people misunderstanding, putting human design into their system that they already have running of hierarchy.
Right.
Not understanding that this is about seeing and valuing differences, opening to differences. They go back into the old pattern of, you're a manifesting generator. Oh my God, you're so lucky. Or I'm just a generator.
Right.
It's easy to do. That's easy to do, but we have to stay awake. We have to, all of us, I think, who are teaching and giving sessions have to stay awake ourselves to what the multidimensional aspect of human design, and not go into that flatsy left brain download informational piece.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's very good. So, okay, I know we have a bunch of people watching and we've only got about 13 minutes left. Well, I should say we have at least a few people watching. And I'm just encouraging people, if you have questions specifically for Robin, to put them in the comments so I can read them to her. But so far, we've just had people saying hello and they're watching. So the other thing that there was something else that I wanted to address with you, and now it just went like this. So is there something you would like to talk about that we haven't talked about?
Let's see. Well, my big exciting thing right now is my latest book on human design and essential oils. And, I've got all these essential oils here, human design essential oils. I like to keep my gates, my gate oils right here, my sun and my earth oils, my incarnation cross. So I've entered, part of my evolutionary process is entering another dimension of working with the chart through the essential oils and bypassing, again, looking, how do we bypass the logical left brain patterning to access some of the earlier constrictions and systems that are running automatically at this point. So I have really found the human design oils like crazy fun, crazy. It's my new frontier with people. It's using the oils.
I just read the book just in the last couple of days, and I have it on Kindle, and so I've highlighted all these things, and I love that it'll save those highlights and stuff for me. And it really spoke to me. And it's funny because when you were talking about your wife, Yarrow, I was like, wait a minute, she's a projector. And the one oil that you recommend for projectors is Yarrow. And I'm like, did you make that up for her? But I didn't. You're not the one who picked him. It was Greg, right. Oils. And that's kind of funny.
Yeah. And another great oil for projectors, or for anybody, but projectors or people who are really open, is Rue, R-U-E. Because anytime you're with someone and you're taking on all their stuff and you leave and you're like, you feel like you've been slimed or something, you smell Rue, and it separates out the energies. It separates out. Yeah. So Yarrow's been using Rue quite a bit.
Yeah. So I don't have that. I don't have either of those two. What I found is I'm going to need to order some of your blends, and I'm very excited to do so. I just have to decide which ones make sense to do first. But you do have even if someone doesn't have essential oils when they get the book, you have other protocols you can do in there that were really interesting. And the way you just speak about the different centers, it's a really, and the types, and knowing whether you're aligned or misaligned. And I love how you talk about when you're misaligned to be like, yay, now I know to do this work, right? So instead of
we never want to beat ourselves up for where we are or what our chart is or how we are in relationship to it. It's not kind. Human design is kindness itself. It's ultimate kindness.
Yes.
It's ultimate compassion.
Yes. Awesome. That's really good. So far, let's see. What essential oils would you recommend for generators? Lisa asks.
Yeah.
I know it's in the book, but if you could maybe just mention a couple or.
Yeah. So, if you're working with your strategy, Lang Lang, YLANG is a good oil to work with your generator strategy. To work with the generator, Lynn. So these are, I will put them on your Facebook page, the links to order these at Greg's site.
Right.
But, for generators, frankincense is a great oil to align with your type. Manifesting generators, I'll just say this since there might be others, lemon verbena or lemongrass. Again, Greg has blends that are going to be, I think the blends are more potent than the single oil, but start with a single oil for sure. Projectors, Yarrow, manifestors, Sitka or Cistus, and reflectors, red pine.
And if someone is not able to right now get them from Greg, is there anything you recommend when someone's choosing an oil? As far as knowing the quality is right? Like, is there any?
I would recommend getting him for me. I get all my oils from Greg just because he's a small, independent. He makes sure all the oils are pure. He's like researching all the oils and where they're coming from. You can buy them in a store, but a lot of them are
Synthetic.
Yeah.
Okay.
And what we're doing is we're bringing in the plant essence. It's going past the blood-brain barrier. So you want pure oils. Let's just say you're bringing it into your bloodstream. It's actually one of the most potent ways to bring, and smell and scent also, like so potent to bring energy, frequency into your system.
Well, I have to say, every book that I have read, I've thought, wow, this is so good. And then every time, whatever the next book is that you write, I think, oh my God, right? And I loved your book on profile lines. So it's definitely my favorite source for in-depth. I love the way I feel like you're the only one who really in-depth talks about the entelechy of the combined profile lines, like what it means to be, not just what it means to be a 6th line and a 2nd line, but what it means to be a 6-2. You really speak to that in ways that I don't think is readily available in other books. And I loved your book on the centers. I'm always, very aware of my open ajna and open head and my tendency to think there's something wrong with me. And sensitivity to do, like even when I read your book and all these great things I read in this last book, but can I pull them out right now? That's why I love the Kindle, and I can highlight them and then I can find them in there and I can send them to people or whatever later when I'm like, I know there was something I wanted to tell you, but I don't know what. But you speak to that so beautifully in the Centers book that I was really surprised at how much I got from you speaking about those centers again in reference to working with the oil. So I think you're
right. Because in the oil book, I really do talk about that continuum of, are we aligned with our generator self? Are we unaligned? Are we aligned with our open head? Are we unaligned? Let's look. Let's bring curiosity, right? Let's look and see. And how do we get aligned?
Yeah. So before we end this, I would just like to ask, because we do have a real mixture of people in this group that this is recorded in. I do put these up on YouTube tomorrow. I usually do it at midnight. They go live. But most of the people watching it well, at least anyone watching it today is in the group, and there's some of them are very new in their journey. So, and I can think of a few people who their questions get very up in their head, and they get very, am I doing this right? What am I supposed to do next kind of thing? And I'm just wondering if you have any, I didn't prep you for this. So hopefully your Ajna is going to find something for the newbies of what you would,
well, I mean, depending on, I really think that my first book, Understanding Your Clients Through Human Design, is one of the easier books to enter into the types with. I try to make it really like, generators are like working dogs and projectors are like cats. I try to make it, these are the strengths, these are the vulnerabilities. I think that's a great place to start right there. I think the biggest thing is to trust yourself and let yourself remember you're in relationship to the triangle. You're in relationship to your body graph. You have your own journey. It's like a kid learning to talk or a kid learning to read. Each person is different. Our tendency is to be in this polarized polarity world, right, wrong, good, bad. Am I getting it? Am I not getting it? So the invitation is to shift your assemblage point, to bring your curiosity. How do I learn it? What's my best way of entering into these waters and being in relationship to yourself with it and with the chart and having an intention of aligning with yourself? Yeah.
Well, that's really great advice. And I did post the links to the two in the book I was just reading. You had links to free versions of both of your first two books, including the one you just mentioned. And so those are in separate posts in the group. So if anybody's interested and hasn't downloaded those yet, you can find those in the group. And I want to thank you so much for taking this time. I really, really have enjoyed it. And I could talk to you, especially about I could really geek out on talking about the assemblage point and all the other things. Although I know my friend Nancy is listening and she doesn't like when I say geek out because she thinks that's something derogatory. To me, it's not derogatory. So Nancy, I don't mean any offense. But I want to thank you for joining us, and just to let people know that, we're talking about human design stories of how human design has helped people to tell a better story of who they are and their journey. And so if you're not aware of how you can shift your journey with human design, if you're ready to rewrite your story, you can reach out to me, or I know you can reach out to Robin, and Robin will put your contact info in here. But is there a specific way that people...
you can write me at robin@clientsandhumandesign.com.
Okay.
That's a great way. I have a website on its way.
Right.
But yeah, it's been my pleasure. Kathy, I love what you're doing. And shifting our stories through human design is really shifting our lives, really, and shifting the world we live in. When we shift our story, we shift the world we live in. So it's very powerful work.